Before we begin, if you enjoy stories about hidden heroes, unexpected acts of courage, and ordinary people whose true character is revealed when it matters most, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Now, let's begin today's story. The moment a child sees a parent humiliated in public is something they never forget. It was just after 5 p.m. at Harbor Market, the busiest grocery store in the small coastal town of Ashford Bay. Families pushed carts through crowded aisles, cash registers chimed non-stop, and the smell of fresh bread drifted from the bakery section near the entrance. Most people were focused on getting home before dinner. Nobody expected to witness something that would stay with them for years. Hannah Mercer stood quietly near the clearance shelves, comparing prices on 2 boxes of cereal. Beside her was her 9-year-old daughter, Lily, clutching a worn paperback book against her chest. Hannah looked like hundreds of other hard-working, single mothers across America. Simple jeans, faded sneakers, a light gray sweater that had clearly seen better days. Nothing about her drew attention. Nothing about her suggested there was anything unusual beneath the surface. She simply looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from carrying too much responsibility for too long. Her cart held only essentials: milk, bread, eggs, a few canned goods. Every item carefully selected, every dollar carefully considered. Lily pointed toward a brand-name cereal on a higher shelf. Hannah glanced at the price tag and smiled gently. "Maybe next time, sweetheart." Lily nodded without complaint. She was used to hearing those words. Unfortunately, someone else overheard them. Derek Vaughn stood only a few feet away. Tall, expensive jacket, polished shoes, and the confidence of a man who enjoyed reminding people he had more money than they did. Around town, everyone knew Derek. He owned one of the largest transportation companies in the county. He also had a reputation for making sure everyone knew it. Derek looked at Hannah's nearly empty cart and smirked. "Still shopping from the discount shelf, huh?" His voice carried farther than necessary. Several shoppers turned their heads. Hannah didn't respond. She simply placed the cereal back on the shelf. Derek laughed softly. "You know, some people spend their lives working hard. Others spend their lives making excuses." The aisle grew quieter. Lily lowered her eyes toward the floor. And that was only the beginning. Hannah acted as though she had not heard him, but Derek seemed to take her silence as an invitation. He stepped closer to the cart and glanced at the store brand items stacked inside. "Let me guess," he said with a grin. "Coupon day." A few uncomfortable chuckles came from the far end of the aisle, not because anyone agreed with him, but because people often laughed when they did not know what else to do. Hannah slowly placed a carton of eggs into the cart and reached for Lily's hand. She was clearly trying to leave. Derek was clearly not finished. "You know what the problem is?" he continued. "People keep making bad choices and then expect sympathy for the consequences." The words hung in the air. Several shoppers exchanged nervous looks. An older woman near the frozen food section seemed ready to say something, but she hesitated and looked away. Lily tightened her grip on her book. Her face was turning red. She understood more than adults realized. Children always did. Hannah finally looked up. Her expression remained calm, almost impossibly calm. "Have a good evening, Mr. Vaughn," she said softly. Most people would have heard kindness in those words. Derek heard defiance. His smile disappeared. "That is it?" he asked. "No excuse? No speech?" Hannah simply turned the cart toward the front of the store. Then Derek said something that stopped her for half a second. "Maybe if your daughter had a better example, she would not grow up making the same mistakes." The aisle became completely silent. Lily's eyes widened. A customer near the end cap lowered his head. Another quietly walked away. Nobody wanted conflict. Nobody wanted attention. Hannah remained still for a moment, her hand resting on the cart handle. Then she looked down at Lily and smiled. Not a forced smile. Not an angry smile. A reassuring one. "Come on, sweetheart," she said gently. "We have dinner to make." Lily nodded, but tears had already begun forming in her eyes. As they started toward the checkout lanes, nobody noticed a man standing near the customer service desk, watching everything unfold. His name was Owen Brooks, and unlike everyone else in the store, he was paying very close attention. Owen Brooks had spent most of his life learning to read people. Years in uniform had taught him that words could lie, appearances could mislead, but behavior almost never did. From across the store, he had watched the entire exchange. He had seen Derek's arrogance. He had seen the discomfort spreading through the aisle. What caught his attention was Hannah. Most people reacted when pushed. Some became angry. Some became defensive. Some walked away carrying their frustration with them. Hannah had done none of those things. She had absorbed every insult without letting it touch her daughter. That detail stayed with him. As Hannah and Lily moved toward the checkout lanes, Owen noticed something else. Lily was trying very hard not to cry. The child kept blinking rapidly while staring at the floor. Hannah never mentioned the comments. She never complained. Instead, she quietly asked Lily whether she wanted tomato soup or chicken noodle soup for dinner. The question seemed ordinary, but Owen understood what she was doing. She was redirecting her daughter's attention away from embarrassment and back towards something safe. That required a level of emotional control most people never developed. Meanwhile, Derek appeared strangely pleased with himself. He leaned against a display of bottled water and exchanged a few words with another shopper who forced a polite smile. The conversation lasted only seconds before the shopper found an excuse to leave. Derek either did not notice or did not care. The atmosphere around him had changed. People were avoiding him now, yet nobody had challenged him directly. Nobody had stepped between him and the woman he had targeted. That bothered Owen more than he expected. 3 separate witnesses had watched the entire scene unfold. An elderly woman, a young father with 2 children, a store, employees stocking shelves nearby. All of them had seen it. All of them had remained silent. Owen understood why. Most decent people hated conflict. Still, something about Hannah's composure refused to leave his mind. Then, just as Hannah reached the checkout area, a loud metallic creak echoed from the seasonal display section near the front entrance. Several heads turned. Owen turned too. In the moment he saw what was beginning to happen, every instinct he had developed over decades immediately came alive. The sound came from a towering seasonal display positioned near the checkout lanes. It stood nearly 8 feet tall and was packed with stacked boxes, canned goods, and promotional merchandise. At first, most people barely noticed it. A small shift, a slight lean, the kind of thing that seemed harmless until it was not. A store employee looked up from across the aisle. His eyes widened. Someone near the registers gasped. The metal frame underneath the display had started to give way. What happened next unfolded in only a few seconds, but later, many people would remember it as if time had slowed down. A young mother pushing a stroller froze in confusion. A cashier stepped backward. Several customers simply stared, trying to understand what they were seeing. Directly beside the display stood a toddler who had wandered only a few feet away from his father. The child was completely unaware of the growing danger above him. His father noticed at the same moment everyone else did. He immediately moved toward his son, but he was too far away. Owen saw it. The father saw it. The employees saw it. But before any of them could react, someone else moved first. Hannah had been standing in line with Lily only moments earlier. Then suddenly she was no longer there. Owen would later struggle to explain exactly what he witnessed. It was not simply speed. It was not panic. It was precision. Hannah crossed the distance with complete focus. No hesitation. No motion. She reached the child, guided him safely out of the path of the collapsing structure, and positioned herself between him and the falling merchandise before anyone else arrived. Seconds later, boxes and products scattered harmlessly across the floor around them. The store erupted with shocked voices. Employees rushed forward. Parents pulled children closer. The toddler began crying more from surprise than fear, but he was unharmed, completely unharmed. Hannah immediately knelt beside him and checked that he was okay. Her voice remained calm, steady, reassuring, as though protecting frightened children during unexpected emergencies was something she had done before. Across the store, Owen Brooks stood frozen, because what he had just witnessed was not normal, not even close. For several long seconds, nobody seemed to know what to say. The checkout area remained frozen in stunned silence as employees hurried to to secure the damaged display. The toddler's father dropped to one knee beside his son and pulled him into a tight embrace. His hands trembled, not because anything terrible had happened, but because he understood how close the situation had come to becoming something very different. "Thank you," he said repeatedly, looking up at Hannah. "Thank you so much." Hannah offered a small smile and gently brushed dust from her sweater. "He is okay. That is what matters." Then she stood and reached for a shopping cart, as if the entire incident had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. That was the second thing that caught Owen's attention. Most people would have been shaken. Most people would have wanted recognition. Hannah wanted neither. She checked on Lily first. "You all right, sweetheart?" Lily nodded, though her eyes were still wide from what she had just witnessed. "Mom, how did you get there so fast?" Hannah paused for the briefest moment before smiling again. Lucky timing. Owen immediately knew that answer was not true. There had been nothing lucky about what he saw. Every movement had been deliberate, controlled, efficient, the kind of response built through repetition and experience. Years of it. Nearby, several customers began discussing what had happened. Some praised Hannah. Others replayed the event from different angles. Yet nobody seemed to notice the one detail Owen could not stop thinking about. Hannah had not looked at the collapsing display first. She had looked at the child. Instantly. As though her brain had identified the priority before everyone else even understood there was a problem. That was not ordinary awareness. That was training. Meanwhile, Derek Vaughn finally approached the growing crowd. He looked annoyed rather than impressed. "People are acting like she saved the world," he muttered loudly. A few boxes fell over. "Let us not turn this into a parade." Several shoppers frowned. For the first time that evening, the room's patience with Derek appeared to be running out. But Owen barely heard him, because a memory from years earlier had suddenly surfaced in his mind, and the more he thought about it, the less he could ignore a disturbing possibility. Owen remained where he was, watching Hannah as the crowd slowly returned to normal. The memory in his mind refused to fade. 15 years earlier, during a large emergency response exercise involving multiple agencies, he had seen a safety instructor demonstrate a specific principle. Do not chase the danger. Protect the most vulnerable person first. Most trainees failed because they focused on the problem. The best responders focused on the people. Hannah had done exactly that. Not after thinking. Not after evaluating. Instantly. The realization sent a chill through him. Hannah guided Lily toward the checkout register and began unloading groceries. Her movements were calm and methodical. She did not seem interested in discussing what had happened. She thanked the cashier, smiled politely at another customer, and carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent years solving problems without needing recognition. Owen started walking toward the register. He was not looking for answers yet. He simply wanted a closer look. As he approached, he noticed something else. Hanging from Hannah's keychain was a small silver fountain pen. It was old, worn smooth from years of use, and engraved with initials that he could not fully read from where he stood. The object looked ordinary, yet something about the way she carried it suggested it mattered. Most people carried keys. Hannah carried a memory. Before Owen could get closer, Derek spoke again. "Amazing," he said loudly. "Now everyone is acting like she is some kind of hero." A few shoppers openly frowned this time. The atmosphere had shifted. Earlier, people had avoided confrontation. Now they seemed tired of listening to him. Hannah, however, ignored the comment completely. She handed Lily a small, reusable shopping bag and quietly asked her to count the items inside. It was another tiny detail, but Owen noticed it. Even after everything that had happened, her attention remained focused on her daughter. Not on herself, not on Derek, not on the crowd. That was when the cashier suddenly looked at Hannah and said something unexpected. "Wait a second," she whispered. "Have we met before?" Hannah's expression changed almost imperceptibly, and for the first time all evening, Owen saw a genuine concern flicker across her face. The cashier immediately looked embarrassed. "I am sorry," she said. "You just look familiar." Hannah forced a polite smile. "I do not think so." Her answer came a little too quickly. Not enough for most people to notice, but enough for Owen. The cashier tilted her head. "Maybe from television?" Hannah shook her head. Definitely not. Then she changed the subject and asked about the total for her groceries. The conversation ended there, but Owen could not ignore what he had just seen. For the first time all evening, Hannah seemed uncomfortable. Not frightened, not nervous, just eager to move on. As the cashier scanned the final items, Lily accidentally dropped the old paperback she had been carrying. The book landed open on the floor. Owen happened to be closest. He bent down, picked it up, and handed it back with a friendly smile. Looks like a good one. Lily smiled shyly. It is my favorite. Before Hannah could respond, Owen noticed writing inside the front cover. It was only visible for a second. Entrée inscription. To Hannah. Thank you for bringing them home. The message vanished as Lily closed the book, but the words hit Owen like a bolt of lightning. Bringing them home. Not helping them. Not teaching them. Bringing them home. The phrase carried a very specific meaning in certain circles. Hannah quickly thanked him and took the book. Again, that same careful expression crossed her face. She clearly did not want attention. She clearly did not want questions. Unfortunately for her, Derek Vaughn had noticed the interaction from across the checkout area. What is this now? He called out. Everybody lining up to congratulate the local celebrity? Several customers rolled their eyes. One man actually shook his head in disgust. Derek seemed completely unaware that he was becoming the least respected person in the store. Owen looked at Hannah, then at the inscription he could still remember, then at the silver fountain pen hanging from her keys. Separate pieces, separate clues. But for the first time, they were beginning to form a picture. And somewhere deep in his memory, a story he had heard years ago was suddenly starting to sound very familiar. Hannah paid for her groceries and began placing bags into the shopping cart. It looked as though the evening was finally coming to an end. Most people assumed the strange tension that had filled Harbor Market was over. They were wrong. Derek Vaughn had spent his entire adult life being the loudest voice in the room, and he was not about to let the attention drift somewhere else. You know what is funny? He said as he slowly approached the checkout area again. Everybody suddenly thinks one lucky moment makes someone special. Several customers visibly sighed. A store manager who had arrived after the display incident looked ready to intervene, but Derek continued before anyone could stop him. People see one dramatic thing happen and immediately start inventing stories. His eyes settled on Hannah. Maybe we should all calm down and remember that saving a few grocery items does not make somebody a hero. The comment was unfair. Everyone knew it. Hannah had not saved groceries. She had protected a child. Yet Hannah refused to engage. She adjusted one of the shopping bags and quietly asked Lily if she remembered to grab her library card. Lily nodded. Once again, Hannah's focus remained entirely on her daughter. That only seemed to irritate Derek more. Look at that, he said, still pretending none of this bothers you. 4. The first time, Owen stepped forward. Not aggressively, not dramatically, just enough to place himself closer to Hannah and Lily than Derek was. I think she's trying to go home, Owen said calmly. Derek glanced at him, and I think nobody asked for your opinion. The tension returned immediately. Nearby shoppers stopped moving. The cashier looked nervous. The store manager took another step forward. Owen held Derek's stare for a moment, then surprised everyone by smiling. Maybe, he said, but I've spent a lot of years studying people. Derek folded his arms. Good for you. Owen looked briefly toward Hannah before returning his attention to Derek. And people do not react the way she reacted unless they have done something extraordinary before. The checkout area fell silent. Hannah looked down at the floor. Derek laughed. But for the first time all evening, the laugh sounded uncertain. Because Owen no longer sounded curious. He sounded convinced. The uncertainty on Derek's face lasted only a second before his confidence returned. Extraordinary, he repeated with a laugh. You're talking about a librarian buying discounted cereal. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Earlier, some might have nodded along. Not anymore. Too many had witnessed what happened near the checkout lanes. Too many had seen Hannah's instinctive response. Owen did not argue. He simply folded his arms and studied Hannah for a moment. Maybe, he said quietly, or maybe there's a reason she keeps trying to avoid attention. Hannah immediately pushed her cart forward. We should go, Lily. But before she could leave, another voice spoke up. Wait. Everyone turned toward the cashier. The young woman stared at Hannah with growing disbelief. I know where I have seen you before. Hannah closed her eyes briefly. It was such a small reaction that most people missed it. Owen did not. The cashier reached beneath the register and pulled out her phone. After a few seconds of searching, she held up the screen. 3 years ago, she said softly, there was a school bus accident during a flood outside Portland. The store grew silent again. I remember watching the interviews afterward. Hannah's expression remained calm, but Lily looked confused. Mom, she asked. The cashier continued. The news never released many names because several families requested privacy. But there was one woman everyone talked about. A volunteer coordinator who organized the evacuation and helped bring dozens of children and teachers to safety before emergency crews even arrived. Derek rolled his eyes. Lots of people volunteer. The cashier ignored him. That woman disappeared from the spotlight right after the story ended. She looked directly at Hannah. You look exactly like her. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then something unexpected happened. An older customer near the pharmacy section slowly stepped forward. He had been quiet the entire evening. She is right, he said. I remember that story too. Owen felt his pulse quicken. A second witness. A completely different recognition. Another piece of the puzzle had just fallen into place. And, judging by the look in Hannah's eyes, she knew the questions were only beginning. The older man took another step forward and adjusted his glasses. I was living in Oregon when that happened, he said. Every local station covered it for weeks. Several customers listened carefully now. Even the store manager had stopped moving. The man pointed gently toward Hannah. They said one coordinator kept going back again and again to account for every child and every teacher. Most people never learned her name because she refused interviews. Derek scoffed. So now she is some kind of celebrity because she volunteered during an emergency? Nobody responded to him. For the first time all evening, his comments seemed to carry no weight at all. Owen watched Hannah closely. She looked neither proud nor impressed by the recognition. If anything, she looked tired. Tired in a way that had nothing to do with work or money. It was a long time ago, Hannah said quietly. Other people helped too. The older man nodded. Maybe. But they interviewed dozens of families afterward. I remember one father saying he got his daughter back because somebody refused to leave until every child was accounted for. Lily stared at her mother. Mom, she asked again, what are they talking about? Hannah hesitated. The question clearly mattered more than anything else happening in the store. Before she could answer, Owen noticed something hanging from the older man's key ring. A small community service medal issued after the Oregon flood response. Suddenly, another memory surfaced. Years ago, he had attended a veterans conference where one speaker described an unnamed civilian coordinator whose decisions had helped emergency teams reach trapped families faster. The speaker had called her one of the most effective crisis leaders he had ever seen. At the time, Owen never learned her name. Now he was beginning to suspect why. Hannah looked down at the silver fountain pen attached to her keys. Her thumb brushed against it for a moment. A private gesture, a personal memory. Then she finally looked at Lily. Sweetheart, she said softly, there are some things I never talk about very much. The store remained silent, because everyone sensed the same thing. Whatever happened during that flood was far bigger than anyone had realized. For a moment, Hannah seemed to be somewhere else entirely. Not in Harbor Market, not standing beside a shopping cart, not surrounded by strangers. Her fingers remained wrapped around the old silver fountain pen. Lily noticed it too. That pen belonged to Dad, did it not? She asked quietly. Hannah nodded. The simple question changed everything. The room suddenly felt smaller, more personal, more real. Your father carried it every day, Hannah said softly. He believed that if you were responsible for people, you never stopped until everyone made a home. Owen felt his chest tighten. There was again. The same phrase, the same idea, bringing people home. Suddenly the cashier's eyes widened. That is why the story sounded familiar. She looked at her phone again. The coordinator was not working alone. There was a rescue team leader too. Hannah looked down. The older customer slowly nodded. I remember now. They said the two of them stayed behind long after everyone else had been evacuated because they were still checking names. Lily stared at her mother in complete confusion. "Mom, why did you never tell me any of this?" Hannah's smile carried both warmth and sadness. "Because that story was never supposed to be about me." The answer only deepened the silence. Owen finally understood what had been bothering him all evening. Hannah never corrected anyone because recognition was not something she wanted. She had spent years avoiding it, years building a quiet life, years making sure her daughter grew up without carrying the weight of old headlines. Then the store manager's phone rang. He answered, listened for several seconds, and slowly looked toward Hannah. His expression changed immediately. "You have got to be kidding me," he whispered. Everyone watched him. "What is it?" asked the cashier. The manager lowered the phone. "I just spoke with someone from the town council." He looked directly at Hannah. "Judge Eleanor Pierce is on her way here right now." Even Hannah seemed surprised by that. And when Owen saw the look on her face, he realized whatever happened during that flood was far more significant than anyone in the store had imagined. Less than 10 minutes later, the front doors of Harbor Market opened again. The conversation throughout the store stopped almost instantly. Judge Eleanor Pierce was one of the most respected people in Ashford Bay. Former judge, community leader, and chairperson of several charitable organizations, she was not someone who appeared unexpectedly in grocery stores. Yet there she was. She walked directly toward Hannah without hesitation. Hannah looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Judge Pierce," she said quietly, "you really did not need to come." The older woman smiled warmly. "After the phone call I received, I absolutely did." The crowd watched in complete silence. Derek Vaughn looked confused for the first time all evening. Judge Pierce turned toward the gathering customers. "Most of you know me," she said. "What many of you may not know is that 3 years ago, I served on the statewide recovery committee after the Oregon flood disaster." Several people exchanged surprised glances. Owen felt his heart begin to race. The judge continued. "Many public officials received awards that year. Many organizations received recognition. But there was one person who refused every ceremony, every interview, and every public honor." She looked directly at Hannah, because she believed the families mattered more than the headlines. The silence deepened. Lily stared at her mother. Derek no longer looked amused. Judge Pierce took a slow breath. The official reports credit Hannah Mercer with coordinating the final evacuation list that reunited dozens of children with their families. Several emergency teams later testified that her decisions helped prevent widespread confusion during the crisis. Hannah lowered her eyes. "There were hundreds of people helping." "Yes," Judge Pierce replied gently. "And many of those people later said they succeeded because of you." Owen finally understood why the reaction in the checkout area had looked so familiar. Hannah was not simply trained. She had spent years carrying responsibility for other people's lives. That instinct had become part of who she was. Then Judge Pierce said something that made the entire store freeze. The state offered Hannah its highest civilian recognition award. She smiled softly. She declined it. Even Derek had no response to that. For the first time all evening, he looked very, very small. No one spoke for several seconds after Judge Pierce finished. The silence felt different now. Earlier, it had been the silence of discomfort. Now it was the silence of understanding. People were no longer looking at Hannah as a struggling single mother standing beside a grocery cart. They were looking at someone who had quietly carried extraordinary responsibility without ever asking for recognition. Lily stared at her mother with wide eyes. "You really did all that?" she asked softly. Hannah knelt beside her daughter and smiled. "A lot of people helped. I was just one of them." Lily shook her head. "But you never told me." Hannah gently brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Because I wanted you to know me as your mom, not as a story from the news." Tears filled Lily's eyes as she wrapped her arms around her. Around them, several customers looked away, suddenly embarrassed by how quickly they had judged what. They thought they understood. Owen felt something settle inside him. All evening, he had been searching for an explanation. Now he had one. The instinct, the composure, the refusal to seek praise. It all fit. Then Judge Pierce turned toward Derek Vaughn. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "Mr. Vaughn," she said calmly, "you spent an entire evening insulting a woman whose character has done more for strangers than most people accomplish in a lifetime." The words landed harder than any argument could have. Derek looked around the store, searching for support. He found none. The customers who had once avoided eye contact were now openly disappointed. Even the store manager stood with folded arms. For the first time all evening, Derek quietly lowered his head. A few moments later, he muttered an apology and walked toward the exit. Nobody stopped him. Nobody followed him. He simply left. Hannah picked up her grocery bags and took Lily's hand. As they headed toward the doors, Owen noticed the old silver fountain, pinned one last time. A simple object carrying a lifetime of memories. Before leaving, Lily looked back at the crowd and then up at her mother. The admiration in her eyes said everything. Sometimes the greatest heroes are not the people standing on stages. Sometimes they're the people standing beside you every day, quietly doing what is right while the world never notices. And that is exactly why you should never judge a person by appearances alone. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who believes that character matters more than appearances. And if you enjoy stories about hidden heroes, courage, sacrifice, and the quiet strength of ordinary people, subscribe to the channel and join our community. Remember, the strongest people are often the ones nobody notices at first. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.